How to evict a tenant in Ontario. Let's get into it right now. What's going on, everybody? My name is Andrew, and if you're new to the channel, we have experience managing over 800 tenancies right here in Southern Ontario. And as such, I want to share with you guys the 5 most effective ways you can go about evicting your tenant if you're having any kind of landlord-tenant dispute. And if you stick around to the end of the video, we're going to share with you the key ingredient that really loops everything together to make sure that you as a landlord can have a successful eviction. Now, before we even start talking about eviction, the first thing you need to consider, or at least understand, is cash for keys. This is going to be the most economical and time-saving method of getting your tenant out of the property. And what you're effectively doing is buying the lease from them, allowing you to terminate the tenancy. Cash for keys is going to be a critical component tying into any strategy you have leading towards evictions. Now, the common question a lot of landlords are going to ask when considering cash for keys is, how much do I have to pay them? Well, that depends on the relationship, the reason why you're looking to terminate the tenancy, what are the financial circumstances of that tenant, and the degree of combativeness you have between the two of you. You got to understand, if you offer somebody too little money, they may not even be able to move. And then some people are going to be greedy about it and start asking for way too much money. Just for some context, I've seen people pay as low as $1,000 or $2,000 to buy out a tenancy, whereas we have in some cases paid up to $20,000. But if cash for keys fails us, now we consider the eviction process. The first way to evict a tenant has to do with if they're not paying rent. If your tenant is not paying rent, you're going to serve them with an N4. It's because tenants either paying their rent late or they haven't paid it at all, and you're going to serve them this form in order to encourage them to pay their rent. If they haven't paid their rent after a certain date, you're going to file with the Landlord and Tenant Board an L form, and this is going to lead to you attending the Landlord and Tenant Board leading up to an eviction if they never catch up on the rent. Just to set the expectation a little bit, this form is not very likely to lead to an eviction if they do in fact catch up with the rent. But now let's say they catch up with the rent. This will bring us into the second reason. They're just persistently paying the rent late, and they're constantly causing you problems or headache, not really allowing you to regulate your bills. So you as a landlord will serve them with the next form, an N8 form, which is pretty much for persistently paying their rent late. If you decide to serve them this form, you have to really consider the context of the lease, which is how long has this lease been in place? If the tenant's been staying there for 5 years and they're being late for like 3 or 4 months, it might not be considered persistently late. But if you have a new tenant and they've been there for 6 months and they've been paying rent late for the 6 months, maybe you can serve them and see how it sits at the Landlord and Tenant Board. But you really have to take this with a grain of salt, because you have to consider what some of this verbiage means, and it's going to be viewed by an adjudicator who's going to use some discretionary judgment here. But now let's say you have a more troublesome situation. Let's say you have a tenant who is causing damage or general problems to the property. How do you go about evicting them? Well, the thing you want to do here is you want to serve them with an N5. The N5 is a very versatile form, and you can serve it under various circumstances, but very commonly it's used when a tenant is causing damage or there's some kind of overcrowding. There's all kinds of ways to go about using this form. Just to throttle the expectations here, this form is not generally effective on the first go. You're going to have to give the tenant an opportunity to correct issues or pay for damages if there are any costs, but the N5 is what you will use if the tenant is causing physical damages to the property. Now, the next way is if the tenant will not allow you to take possession or to move into the property. This often happens when somebody goes and buys a rental property or property in general that's tenanted and they're looking to move in. Now you need to kick them out. If you want to do this, you need to serve them with an N12. This is for if you, the homeowner, or a direct family member is looking to take possession of the unit. Now, this form is generally heavily scrutinized at the Landlord and Tenant Board because it is very often abused. You know, we don't want to be kicking tenants out of their homes for no justifiable reason. And the N12 is for you as a homeowner or a direct family member to be taking this property for your own personal use, to be living in it. And the fifth and final way to go about evicting a tenant is with the N13, which is for extensive renovations. Just to make sure to clarify this form takes 120 days to execute, meaning that when you serve the form, it says on it that the tenant has 120 days to leave the apartment, and there are a lot of stipulations that come with this. And if you want to know more about how to use this form, because it's a little complicated, make sure to check out some of our other videos, because we go into detail as to how you can go about serving this form and under what circumstances. Now, in order to wrap this up, I want to give you guys the key ingredient that really brings all this together to make sure that your evictions are effective, which is you want to maintain communication and dialogue with your tenant as open as possible. Not just communication, also maintain the cash for keys option, because as you serve these forms and as you add pressure and as the date comes closer to go to the hearing at the landlord and tenant board, pressures rise and people often become a little bit more open and agreeable towards communication. They become a little bit more agreeable to work together, and you can create a win-win or a lose-lose situation for both of you. At least you can walk away relatively unscathed. Now, if you're having more complicated problems at your rental property, you want to know how to resolve them. For example, if you have a tenant that's not paying rent, I'm going to leave a link right here to a video where if your tenant hasn't paid rent and has left the property, how do you go about collecting? You can check that out. We have tons of free material on how you can be a better landlord. In the meantime, if you need more help, we do have coaching and training programs. Check the link on our bio. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and I'll see you on the next one.